Okay, we're going to be hot in 15 seconds, people. Stand by. Queue open.
Talent, check your spot.
Audio up.
Clear the set, everybody.
Stand by camera 3. Stand by camera 1. Camera 4, check your focus.
Carol, make sure the phone guests are standing by.
Stand by camera 2.
Okay, Don, we're ready out here.
Okay, thanks. Let's rock and roll. Count them in.
10, 9,
Here we go.
8,
Flying graphic.
7,
Camera 2,
6,
I'm going to be coming to you
5,
first. Stand by to cue mark.
4, 3, 2.
And cue mark.
Hello, I'm Mark Crutcher, President of Life Dynamics, and I want to welcome you to Life Talk for October 2014. I've rounded up all the usual suspects, and they're lurking nearby, and we've got a lot of interesting things for you. But of course, Alan pouts if we don't let him go first. So here he is with this month's Life Talk News. Alan?
All right, thank you, Mark. California authorities say that 29-year-old Francisco Jasso severely beat his pregnant wife and threatened to stab her to death along with their unborn child. The victim told police that during the assault, Jasso told her that he was going to make sure that she had an abortion. The incident follows a pattern that Life Dynamics identified in its report, Under the Radar Violence, in which it was documented that violence against women who refuse to submit to abortion is common. And that report can be downloaded at prolifeamerica.com. In Alabama, a pro-life student group has filed a lawsuit against the University of South Alabama. The students say that when they applied to set up a memorial for unborn babies killed by abortion outside the limited free speech zone, they were denied permission by school officials who call the display controversial. The group, which is being represented by Alliance Defending Freedom, is asking the court to order the university to permit free speech throughout its campus and to pay an unspecified amount of compensation to students for life, as well as court costs. Well, in Texas, Highland Park Presbyterian in Dallas has agreed to pay $7.8 million to a regional parent group for the Presbyterian Church USA rather than remain part of the theologically liberal denomination. Earlier this year, PCUSA voted to allow same-sex marriages and refused to condemn the killing of babies who were born alive after surviving a botched abortion. According to the denomination's website, the PCUSA has lost more than 100,000 members and 190 congregations since 2011. In Virginia, state inspectors have revealed numerous health code violations at an abortion clinic operated by abortionist William Fitzhugh. The documents obtained by the Family Foundation of Virginia also show that the Charlottesville Medical Center for Women had no one on staff certified to treat women who have adverse reactions to drugs they are given at the facility. Victoria Cobb, president of the Family Foundation of Virginia, points out that abortion clinic inspection reports she has reviewed have documented over 400 health and safety violations in the state. She has called for a full investigation of this abortion clinic, as well as others run by Fitzhugh. Well, the Indiana Attorney General's office has filed complaints against 4 abortionists in 3 counties. The case is based on information supplied by Indiana Right to Life, which obtained copies of reports filed with the state. The group discovered that not only were abortionists Ulrich Klopfer, Rasad Pasek, Kathleen Glover, and Raymond Robinson omitting important information from the forms, but Klopfer was not reporting suspected child sexual abuse on underage girls. A report recently published by Life Dynamics shows that when abortion clinics violate state mandatory reporting laws, the most common result is that the victims are returned to the rapist and the sexual abuse continues. That report can be downloaded at prolifeamerica.com. A Michigan abortionist with a long history of botched abortions has been found responsible for negligence and incompetence. A state judge said that there was overwhelming evidence that abortionist Robert Alexander was operating his abortion clinic in squalid conditions and engaging in practices that put women's lives at risk. The case began in 2012 after Operation Rescue filed a complaint against Women's Medical Services based on information provided by a former employee. The judge's report has been forwarded to the Michigan Board of Physicians, which could decide to revoke Alexander's license. And in Ohio, pro-lifers have confirmed that a father and son killing team has ceased doing abortions at their Columbus location. Abortionists Milroy and Mervyn Samuel, who run Complete Healthcare for Women, have performed abortions in central Ohio for decades. Mark Harrington, founder of the pro-life group Created Equal, said that they recently began a postcard campaign to expose the abortionists to the public. In addition, the group pressured a local hospital to revoke their admitting privileges. Harrington cited those efforts as well as the inability of many Ohio abortion mills to meet state safety laws, with contributing to the duo's decision to quit performing abortions. In other closings, the Planned Parenthood facility in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, has shut their doors after 36 years in operation. In a letter published by the local media, the group cited state budget cuts targeting Planned Parenthood as their reason for the closure. Meanwhile, the Planned Parenthood Association of Hidalgo County, Texas, has announced that it's severing ties with the national organization in an attempt to recoup tax dollars cut by the state. In 2011, the Texas lawmakers cut funding to clinics that either perform or refer for abortions, leading to the closure of 76 clinics, a third of which were Planned Parenthood facilities. The disassociation affects Planned Parenthood operations in 6 counties. Well, a New Jersey judge is calling the conduct of abortionist Stephen Brigham troubling and has recommended that his license be revoked. Judge Jeff Mason said that Brigham's practice of starting late-term abortions in South Jersey, then telling women to drive to his Maryland abortion clinic where he would finish the procedure, was a scheme to skirt a state law that requires abortions after 14 weeks to be performed in a hospital or other licensed medical facility. In addition to revocation, Mason recommended that Brigham pay $30,000 in fines as well as investigative and court costs. The final decision on Brigham's license will be made by the State Board of Medical Examiners. Well, a U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit has reinstated a lawsuit filed against Planned Parenthood of the Heartland by a former director of the organization. In 2011, Alliance Defending Freedom attorneys filed the lawsuit on behalf of Susan Thayer under a federal law that allows whistleblowers with inside information to expose fraudulent billing by government contractors. Thayer accused Planned Parenthood of submitting repeated false and fraudulent claims for reimbursements to Medicaid and failing to meet acceptable standards of medical practice. The lawsuit had been dismissed in 2012, but in its decision reinstating the case, the Eighth Circuit found that Thayer had presented sufficient evidence against Planned Parenthood for the case to proceed. In Louisiana, construction of a new Planned Parenthood megacenter in New Orleans has been halted. According to state documents, Planned Parenthood had hired Barr McNeely Investments to construct the facility, but apparently the company did not want the public to know it was complicit in building an abortion clinic. So in violation of state law, they used their initials, BMI LLC, on official documents and then hired another contractor, Quality Diamond Products, who wasn't licensed to work in the state. Well, as a result, authorities have placed Barr McNeely on supervised probation for a year and fined them $2,500 for using an unlicensed name and assessed a $4,500 fine on Quality Diamond Products. And at the same time, the Catholic Archbishop of New Orleans, Gregory Imond, published a letter threatening to blacklist any individual or business involved in the construction project. Well, despite their targeting of blacks and Hispanics for abortion, Planned Parenthood is now reaching out to minority groups to help finish the job. And Planned Parenthood is once again set to receive more than $500,000 U.S. taxpayer dollars to work as navigators for Obamacare. For the second year in a row, the Department of Health and Human Services will award 2 Planned Parenthood chapters in Iowa and Montana federal grants to sign people up for Obamacare. In addition to the Iowa and Montana facilities, a New Hampshire company that lists 6 of its 39 clinics as Planned Parenthood offices will also receive part of the money. Well, finally, in Rockford, Illinois, city officials announced plans to open a police substation in a building previously occupied by the Northern Illinois Women's Center. However, the president of the local police union, Terry Peterson, has informed them that more than a dozen officers have said they will not report to work in a building that once housed an abortion clinic. The facility closed in early 2012 after nearly 40 years in business. In recent years, the clinic's operators had a well-documented habit of mocking Christians and openly flaunting the killing of children. The city has not yet said how it will respond to the situation. Alan Ackles here for Life Talk News. You can get daily news updates by logging onto ProLifeAmerica.com. Mark, there you go. Back to you.
Thanks, Alan. All right. I'm back again with my trusty sidekick, Renee Hobbs.
Hello.
Renee. And Father Frank, the lovely Father Frank.
Good to be here.
Sidekick. And Destiny De La Rosa. Herndon De La Rosa.
Herndon De La Rosa.
Leave out some of your names. And of course, Troy Newman's back. We locked the doors, but he got in anyway.
I've got a key. I've been here so long.
You had a key made when we weren't looking, right? So here he is. We got a lot to get to today. You know, first thing I want to talk about is this because it's topical right now, is this situation with the NFL on this Ray Rice situation, him beating up his girlfriend, then later to become his wife. Why this girl married him after this, that's the biggest mystery of this whole thing to me. But first off, you know, you and I have talked about this many times. I think any man that would lay his hands on a woman is a coward and no good whatsoever. Let's make that clear up front. This guy is, I don't understand this. I was raised in a household where there was one thing you didn't do is hit girls. I mean, when I was a kid, my brother and I mean, we thought it was unfair that we didn't get to hit our sister, you know, because you think, well, what's she there for if you can't hit her and beat her up once in a while? But anyway, we didn't get to do that, you know, because my daddy would beat us up. But there's some interesting things. I think there's some real hypocrisy going on here, some major league hypocrisy. First off, they're talking about losing sponsors over this, and one of them is Anheuser-Busch. Well, if there were, let's say, 10,000 instances of domestic violence in America today, let's just say that's how many there are, what percentage of those are involving beer, do you think?
Or some other alcoholic beverage.
Or some other alcohol.
Yeah, probably
98%?
Sure.
The majority.
So why doesn't the NFL then say to Anheuser-Busch, why doesn't Anheuser-Busch, they're so concerned about this, say we're not going to manufacture beer anymore because we know this leads to domestic violence, much more so than the NFL does, exponentially more so. But I think there's another lesson in this that is applicable to the pro-life movement. We've had this discussion here before about the use of the graphic images. I want to ask you why it is. This situation with Ray Rice was known for several months, right? He had already...
But this was a dead issue for months ago.
Right.
Everybody saw the video of him dragging her out of the elevator. He had pled guilty to some sort of assault. He had suffered some little retribution with the NFL. He couldn't play a couple of games or some monetary fine. But it wasn't until the video came out of her actually punching her did the whole world go berserk.
Right.
All the facts were the same. Everybody knew what they saw earlier was the same. But it wasn't until they saw the actual punch did the whole world go insane.
Right. And I think that's kind of, it's like you and I have talked about for 20 years. You have to show what the reality is. Mm-hmm. And I'm older than everybody here. I remember in the Vietnam War, the American media was pretty much on the side of the pro-war people in America during Vietnam. The media didn't turn against it, and therefore the public didn't turn against it until they actually started showing the bodies of these boys floating down the Mekong Delta in Vietnam. And then American opinion completely flopped on the Vietnam War just from seeing it. There is something about seeing the visual image.
Yeah.
And you and I have had this discussion for years.
We sure have, and a lot of people say, well, I know what happens in an abortion. Well, it's just like, I know what happened in this case.
Right.
And the knowing is not enough. There's different levels of knowing.
Right.
You can know there's poverty in the world, but does that make you write a check to feed the poor? No, what makes you write the check is when you see the picture of the emaciated face, right, and the eyes looking up at you, and that's why they use these pictures to promote aid efforts for the poor.
Well, and it's like I hadn't thought about that analogy to the poor, to the starving, but just coincidentally, just a couple of days ago, I brought you that picture that we were talking about.
Of that vulture.
Yeah, this was years ago, and it's one of the most heartbreaking, gut-wrenching pictures I've ever seen. I don't know if y'all have all seen this, but in Africa, there was some starvation in this country. I think it was Life was over there reporting, or I think it's Life magazine was over there and had a photojournalist there reporting about it. And they were following these people that were going to this place where they could get food. And there was this little girl who was orphaned, and she was trying to make her way to this place where she could get food, and she had kind of collapsed, and she was kind of leaning over. And there was a vulture following her, waiting for her to die. And that photographer snapped that picture, and he won a Pulitzer Prize, I think, for that photo, if I'm not mistaken, and then committed suicide a little bit later. That picture just haunted this guy of this vulture following that little girl as she tried to go get food.
It's pretty heartbreaking.
Anyway, yeah, I just think, and I know you have some different opinions about the graphic images. You're not particularly wild about them.
I understand the need for them in order to inform people. And I will say this is one of those areas where I feel like men and women respond to them very differently. And I would say the same is even true for ISIL. You know, the things that I was seeing on Facebook were a lot of women who were saying, please stop posting pictures of beheaded children. Like, I think it affects us differently. I think men being more visual maybe do need to see that in order to be motivated. Like, I do not want to see a picture of a beheaded child. I don't need it to become more passionate. Same's true with abortion. I think that there are instances on college campuses where if you have these pictures up, you probably are informing a generation of males who maybe need those tools in their arsenal to be able to understand what abortion is. I feel like women are a little bit more inherently aware of what a human being is.
Well, you're the ones who carry them.
We're the ones who carry them, and I think that's why it's so incredibly destructive to have them at the doors of the abortion clinic. I think that's where you need to be a safe person. You need to be someone that a woman can go to for resources and help. You don't need to be this shock and awe person who just has this bloody image up. Especially, and I think also we've got women who have miscarried and things like that, and it's the napalm of our movement where it kind of, I think, can go out and might help some, but really I think it alienates a whole lot of other people who otherwise are more sensitive than some of the men who seem to promote these tools. That's what I have learned from my experience in speaking with post-abortive women and also pro-choice women, that, you know, it's like it clicks something off in their head. It makes them angry. It does not make them compassionate or open to talking about anything. And I can tell you, it was the same way with the images of beheaded children. If I saw an article that I even thought was about to show a picture of that from, you know, ISIL beheading children, I was done. I wasn't communicating. I clicked out of it. Like, I feel like it genuinely shut me down emotionally so much that I could not take in more information. And I wonder how often the same can be applied to the pro-life movement. I think that when you're in conversation with somebody and you're having that relationship and they need information, there's an opportunity to show them that, and then they're open to it. And really it comes down to the difference between looking at something and seeing something. And we need to make sure that we don't exploit these children by just having people look at the images. They need to see the images and understand what they are. And without conversation, I'm afraid that often that doesn't happen.
Yeah, but let me chime in here, because I do agree with about 99% of what you're saying. The aborted baby pictures are not something as a tool to use in front of an abortion clinic to talk a woman out of an abortion. But in the same case where we see pictures of ISIS or ISIL beheading children or decapitating journalists, causes us to act to end the atrocity. We can't just bury our head in the sand and pretend like it's not happening. I was passionate about ending the Holocaust in Iraq and Syria before I saw these. I was yelling about the drone strikes before we saw the carnage of what was going on.
How long have we had images of aborted children?
No, that's not the point.
How long have we done it? Has it changed anything
We've had it for at least 20 years, and that's
it hasn't ended the war on unborn children.
It has. We've seen the rate of abortion going down, the numbers of abortions going down, the numbers of abortion clinics.
And that's from graphic images.
The number of abortion clinics have been gone down by 73% since we've enlarged these pictures of aborted babies, the graphic imagery. But my point is that these images are not often the best tool to talk a woman out of an abortion, but they're the best tool to show people in NOW or politicians or the people, the gatekeepers in power that keep abortion legal. We're going to use every tool in our arsenal to end abortion, not just talk a few women out of abortion.
Right. Well, I think it has moved the needle. I mean, I've had conversations with people who said it moved the needle for them, that this was what won them over, or this is what convinced them. I thought about abortion, and I think, again, going back to this Ray Rice situation, you could have had everybody in the world saying, oh yeah, well, a guy shouldn't go into an elevator and knock out his girlfriend, shouldn't be doing that, and I'm sure that was an awful thing. But they didn't get really jacked up about it until they actually saw the video of it happening. And there's something about seeing it that makes a difference.
And again, the hypocrisy of Anheuser-Busch pulling their sponsorship, go back to the pro-life movement, the hypocrisy of somebody like the state senator in New York saying that pregnancy counseling centers are lying to women and we need to shut them down. When at the same time, Planned Parenthood is the ultimate liar and abuser of women.
Right. It's pretty unbelievable. Speaking of unbelievable, we've got a lot of stories to get to here. We've got some philosophical things we want to talk about today. Huffington Post runs this article from this woman, Layla Josephine, who was celebrating her abortion, literally. And she says that she thinks the girl, the baby that she aborted was a she. And she kept on saying, she said 6 times in this article, I'm not ashamed, I'm not ashamed, I'm not ashamed. She said it 6 times in this
She's
article.
trying to convince herself?
That's what I was about to say.
She's trying to, she's
Yes.
not trying to convince me.
She's trying to convince herself.
Exactly. And she said, this is my body, I'm not ashamed, 3 times, and I'm not ashamed 6 times. The amazing thing is, she says, this is a quote from this woman, I would have died for my aborted daughter's right to choose, just like she died for my right to choose.
Ooh.
This woman is a pathological liar, first off. Her daughter did not die for her right to choose. She killed the daughter. There's a big difference between somebody dying and somebody getting killed. This is 2 totally different things. But obviously, and this is something, I brought this up because this is something we see routinely where people, it can be men or women, men trying to justify forcing their girlfriend or wife or whoever to have an abortion, women trying to justify having had an abortion, where they parse words like this, saying, well, my child gave its life for my right to choose. No, it didn't. Your child was murdered for your right to choose. You murdered your own child for your right to choose. That's what you did. So let's at least be honest about it when we're describing what happened here. But we see this sort of thing on a routine basis.
If you're going to be honest, honestly, in America, with modern day medicine, how many women are dying in childbirth?
Almost 0.
But if you talk to the pro-aborts like Wendy Davis here in your state, the Democratic governor nominee, she said that she was going to die if she didn't have an abortion. If you talk to the pro-abortion crowd, every one of these pregnancies is going to kill this woman. Right. And that's why they have to have the abortion. Well,
if you bring an OBGYN into a room, into here, whatever, and ask him what fatal disease do women have, potentially fatal disease, for which abortion is the cure.
Yeah, it's 0.
There's no disease out there
that's why abortion is not health care.
Right, it's not health care. And, we got this, like I said, this woman, Wendy Davis, running for governor here, who's a raging pro-abort, made her name, basically, the abortion Barbie. And now she's come out, since our last month's show, she's come out and admitted she's killed 2 of her babies, 2 late-term abortions. And I'll guarantee you there's a lot more than 2 in Wendy Davis's background. But she thinks she's going to win the governorship of Texas by bragging about her abortions, or trying to make it appear that she's not upset about them.
The interesting thing was the extremely pro-choice side was actually kind of ticked that she came out with these sympathetic cases versus just saying abortion on demand, totally healthy baby anytime in the 40-week span. That's what they're fighting for, not her, sympathetic abortion.
Well, this is that article that I was right here. This woman in The Guardian, Jessica Valenti, writing that she was criticizing Wendy Davis for saying this. She said, because we don't need to justify our abortions. Healthy baby, 3rd trimester, it doesn't matter. If we just don't want to be pregnant, it doesn't matter. Right. That reason is as valid as killing a baby because it may have had health problems. So,
that's where they have to go. They have to go abortion on demand without apology through all 9 months, or no abortion at all. Yeah. Because when you start justifying it, you are saying that baby has a right to life, and that crumbles the whole mountain.
And now go ahead.
It's like, I remember a group of people in New York City. We were having a life chain in Manhattan one time, and there were these 3 women sitting on the sidewalk holding signs that said pro-choice. So I went over and started talking with them, and I said, so tell me what your sign means. And they said, oh, well, you know what it means. No, I want to hear your explanation of what it means. I said, well, we believe, choice, you should be able to end a pregnancy by your own choice. I said, so how far into the pregnancy? Well, it's better if it's earlier. I said, now, wait a second.
Right.
What do you mean it's better if it's earlier? Isn't it choice all the way through? How can it be better if your rationale is, I can do this because it's my choice? Then there's no better or worse. And this is where I cheer these people on. I say, let the public know that you're for abortion on demand without apology throughout all 9. But we want to hear that. Right. Because that is going to show where the American people really stand. And that is that they're way closer to our position than they've ever been to that extreme position.
Exactly right. Yeah, what you're basically doing is saying, define choice for me. What does that mean? Yeah. Because everything's a choice. Every action that we ever take, every action that any human being ever took in the history of the world was a choice. So if you're going to say I'm pro-choice, that means you're for those people being allowed to do anything they want to do. That's anything they want.
Well, and as we're waxing philosophically, there's a moral dimension to this as well. We're not talking about a choice between water and iced tea or Coke and Pepsi, which has no real morality, although my wife would probably say that Pepsi and Coke have sugar and stuff like that in. But when you talk about abortion, what's the difference between a 1st trimester abortion, 2nd trimester abortion, 3rd trimester abortion? in these women's minds that it's better somehow to have an earlier abortion. What they're saying is it's less moral to kill a baby in the 9th month than it is the 1st month. So that obviously there's a moral dimension to this.
Right.
And it's not something in the relationship of making an amoral decision between Coke and water.
Well, the good thing, one of the things that's related to this, I had a story here that we were going to talk about, is the issue of sex selection abortion. This is putting the pro-aborts in a very bad situation because sex selection, America is now, as we talked about last month's show, America is now being seen around the world as the place you go for sex selection abortions because other states have, other countries have outlawed it. And so now people are coming to America for sex selection abortions because we don't prohibit it. This is putting the pro-aborts between a real rock and a hard place because all the stats show that in something like 92 or 93% of the time, when a baby is aborted because it's the wrong sex, it's a female that's aborted, right? Now the supervisor, which is basically a city council person in San Francisco, David Chiu, C-H-I-U, he wants San Francisco to become the first city in America that through its own laws prohibits a ban on sex selection abortions.
Prohibits a ban.
Prohibits a ban.
So allows sex selection abortion.
Because what he's afraid of is maybe the state or somebody's going to come along or maybe another city council is going to come along and say we want to ban abortions in San Francisco for sex selection. So he's wanting to preempt that by having a law passed first that says no, we cannot ban sex selection.
This is David Chiu.
Right.
So I'm not a prognosticator, but I'm going to say, and I know San Francisco pretty well has a heavy Chinese immigrant population. Right. The irony there is that that's what's being done in his home country of China. Sex selection abortions on women has gone through the roof, and now they have an exponentially more amount of men than they do women in the country. And
historically, I don't know if you've ever studied this or not. Historically, when you had a nation that had a disproportionate share of men, one of the results of that was wars.
Absolutely.
That's almost an inevitable result of that situation. But anyway, now we've got something we talked about this, I think, last month, IntelliGender gender prediction test that you can get at the pharmacy that tells you, like a pregnancy
what
test,
you're going to have.
if you're going to have a boy or a girl.
Yeah.
So
is that the one called Pink or Blue?
I don't know if it is.
We talked about it a few years
And I'm sure that's so accurate.
I know,
So accurate to
exactly.
be choosing life or death for your child. Basically.
As early as 10 weeks, you can know just by this home.
You know, we actually, at New Wave Feminists, we had this graphic called Fiona the Feminist Fetus, and we would make her say, you know, randomly, like stuff that pro-choice feminists would be saying. And so she would say, my body, my choice, but obviously she's like inside the womb. And we had one that said, I'll make sure to thank a radical feminist for my right to choose if I make it out of here alive.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's what they don't understand is, and I think it puts a lot of feminists in this awkward spot because they are fighting for abortion on demand, no apology, yet they have to realize that abortion is, I mean, honestly, one of the biggest tools of the patriarchy. Who does it serve more times than not, except for predators, men who don't want to have to pay child support, a predominantly male government that doesn't want to subsidize your child. Like, how is abortion not a tool of the patriarchy?
Well, I was picketed by the patriarchy people last month.
I heard you're.
I thought that was
target
ironic.
on you.
But Fiona the feminist fetus
Fiona
was
the
not
feminist
there.
fetus. She was not. Because she is probably a big fan.
Does
Speaking
she know Umbert the Unborn?
No, we should introduce them.
You know, we've talked here before about these so-called doulas. Somebody that helped somebody through a pregnancy. Now they're helping them through abortions. They're holding their hands.
Yeah.
The abortion doulas.
And there was one, Alex Ronan became a doula, and she had to make the conscious decision to lie to patients about the graphic, bloody details of her first year as an abortion doula. In other words, what she saw. She said, I had to make a conscious decision to lie to my patients. But another thing she said is when she took her training, she was told that she had to be supportive of women who were having abortions, even if they were having sex selection abortions to kill a female baby. As an abortion doula, you have to be supportive of that. This is the pro-woman side of this deal? I mean, the hypocrisy of this knows no bounds.
Mark, that abortion doula story, is that the one where she details her first year,
Yeah.
her first abortion, and what happened in her first abortion that she did?
It
was a horrific,
horrific
abortion.
experience. Yeah,
blood everywhere. This poor woman had to be rushed to the hospital,
right,
to have an emergency, a cesarean and hysterectomy. Could never have children again. The woman almost died, which I thought, well, this proves our point that abortion clinics shouldn't be outside the ambulatory surgical procedure guidelines.
Well, like I said, the hypocrisy of these people is unbelievable, especially when you start looking at the media. I don't know if y'all have noticed this or not. We're not going to talk a lot about it, but back when Obama was lying through his teeth and telling everybody that Obamacare would not cover abortions, every time he would mention that somewhere, this is front page around the country. They're pumping this. Obamacare will not pay for abortions. Well, now that it's been exposed, because we've all got to read it, right? You can't read it until you pass it, as Pelosi said.
I actually read it before they passed it.
Well, anyway, she said nobody that voted on it read it before they passed it. Anyway, now that we know that Obamacare does pay for abortion, and all these people are out here saying it, and even the Obama administration is talking about the ways that it can pay for abortion, the media is not covering that suddenly.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Well, because we already bought it.
Yeah, we already bought it. It's
already
a done
been
deal.
shoved down our throat. So stop talking about it.
Yeah, speaking of Obamacare, we talked about this last month about the Little Sisters of the Poor.
Right.
They're still
going
after them. They will not leave them alone. These ladies are not considered church or church-like, so they aren't covered.
These are nuns.
Yes,
Nuns
these
aren't
are
church-like.
Right,
They're
exactly.
not getting contraception.
They're not, and they don't need any of that. They don't need coverage for abortion or sterilization or...
Yeah. Well, the Obama administration is doing the same thing with us. They're telling the priests, too. Here we have priests for life. You're not a church. You have to provide, the coverage for abortion-inducing drugs to your employees. Our case continues to move forward. And we just said, listen, whatever the court decides, we're not doing it. Some people they take a very intellectual approach. Oh, well, we're going to study this. We're going to see what the administration says about that. No, we already told them from the beginning, we will not obey this mandate. And yet they keep, Little Sisters of the Poor, priests for life. You're really going to try to force us to act contrary to our faith? I mean, this is,
it's ridiculous.
and it really shows who they are.
I'm really glad to hear you say that, Father, because you're one of the few organizations out there with some real guts, some real chutzpah, to say that you're not going to obey this. And I think that's what we need to go in this country.
Yes.
Look, there are large Christian universities, large Christian companies, large organizations that are 501c3 that are founded on Christian principles that are already paying for plans that pay for abortion. And they're the same people that signed the Manhattan Declaration at the very end said, I will not disobey my conscience. Yeah. These are the same people that are doing it. So I applaud you.
Hey, I want to, just real quick, Germany is dedicating a memorial to all the disabled people that the Nazis killed and talking about the horrible. How is that different than what we're doing? 97% right now of all the babies in America that are diagnosed with Down syndrome are executed in the womb.
Right.
How are we any better than these people? I challenge anybody to tell me the answer.
We're not seeing it, Mark.
Oh, yeah, right.
That's why.
Hey, I want to talk about something here, a couple of things. First off, and this goes to something that Renee and I get into all the time, and we've kind of touched on it before, but I think we need to hit on it again. When we talk to these women, and Renee and I talk to a lot of women that call in here post-aborted because they call on our 800 number looking for legal help or medical help or sometimes psychological training, counseling. And one of the things that you universally hear, we start talking to these women because usually what you're talking about is a woman whose conscience is bothering her. They might call asking about a lawyer, but when you really get down to it, that's not really what they want in 90% of the cases. Mm-hmm. And I'll start talking to them about their spiritual life and what is their history, their spiritual history and so forth. And almost without exception, they'll say, I'm a Christian. And so we start talking about the issue of forgiveness. And I'll let you tell. What is the number one thing they say, Renee?
They can't feel like they're forgiven. They don't feel like they're forgiven.
They say God will forgive them,
right?
But they can't forgive themselves.
Right.
And this is almost a universal thing that you hear from every one of these women. God will forgive me. I know God has forgiven me, but I just can't forgive myself. And one of the things that I've developed this years ago, and I always tell these women it's the same thing. I can understand that on a human level, but on a spiritual level, you're wrong. Because what you're saying when you say, God can forgive me, but I can't forgive myself, what you're really saying is my standards are higher than God's, right? Because He can forgive me, but my standards are much higher, so I can't forgive myself. And you'd be amazed how we've talked before about how easy it is to save a baby. We had that situation last month where somebody used one of our 25-cent brochures and had a turnaround at an abortion clinic where the guy came out and they handed him the brochure and he went back in and got his girlfriend and brought her out. You could save a baby for 25 cents. We've seen, and you've been on these calls talking to these women, where just that one statement, just kind of like a light goes off. And so you never know when an argument that you make, and I've done this before with these women, and you've heard it, where they just, wow, I never thought about it from that standpoint. And 10 minutes later, we've got her turned around and she's laughing and she's happy again, and she's accepted the forgiveness for what she's done and she's gone on about her business. And but just sometimes the smallest little thing that you can say can either save a baby or in this case save a woman.
Yeah, that's right.
It's amazing. This thing is not as complicated as people want you to think it is.
Go ahead.
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge the bondage that abortion puts women in, because we're always talking about how we were so oppressed before and then abortion liberated us. But really, when you think about it, like the fear before was being chained to a stove barefoot and pregnant, which I'm not saying is great, but look at the bondage we have now, where you have a lifetime of just immense guilt and anger, and it manifests itself in all these other ways that we're seeing from a lot of post-abortive women, which the studies are widely being ignored because we don't want to acknowledge that that's what's happening. But there's emotional bondage that these women are feeling that really just crushes them from, the inside out. How do we call that liberation in any way?
Yeah. We've only begun to scratch the surface of how damaged people are when they have abortions. There's plenty of, we run the largest post-abortion healing ministry in the world, Rachel's Vineyard. We have the Silent No More campaign. These men and women alike are giving their testimonies about what it's like to lose a child to abortion. But the damage that's done, and we're not saying a woman is sometimes damaged by abortion. We're not saying most of the time. Absolutely, 100% of the time, you have an abortion, you are deeply damaged. Now, deeply damaged is actually the title of a book by our friend.
Whether you agree to it or not.
Whether you agree to it or not, whether you admit it or not, doesn't matter. You are damaged, and not only that, all your relationships have been damaged. Your relationship with the father of that baby, or with your current spouse or boyfriend, even if he's not the father, your relationship with your parents, with your friends, with yourself, with God. It's damaged, period, 100% of the time, and more deeply than we've even begun to imagine. And that's why, one of the things we're doing as we go into get ready for next year is looking at the healing programs that are out there for those that have had abortions. And we literally have a situation where it's like people walking around with terminal cancer and being treated with Band-Aids. I mean, if you don't have the tools or the medicine or the hospitals or the doctors at your available, then you do whatever it is you can do to get a little bit better. But we have got to start taking a serious look at how, if somebody becomes a doctor, he doesn't go along and say, well, I think I'm going to come up with my own method today of doing an appendectomy. No, there's a standard of care based on human nature and based on what medicine knows about human nature, and you do an appendectomy according to certain standards. And the whole area of healing after abortion, a lot of times people are just coming along and they're filled with goodwill. They say, oh, we want to help these women, we want to help these women. And there is a lot of things you can do to help them, but we've got to get down and really get to the depths of healing these people with serious, lifelong, effort of helping them. And we just don't. I'm more and more convinced we haven't even scratched the surface.
You're right.
Father, how much more is that true for the workers inside the abortion clinics? And I know that you have a program that's coming up soon with the Centurion program.
Yes, that's right.
That maybe we should highlight for people that may know someone that was working inside an abortion clinic.
The Centurions were started officially in 1996. So we're coming up on 20 years now of this worldwide ministry. And again, I just mentioned the example of a cancer patient. This was started by a medical doctor, Philip Ney, Canadian psychiatrist. Back in the early 90s, he started researching this and came up with not only the theory and the research about the kind of damage that's done to the worker, to the abortionist. But then what's the path of healing and how do you come out of that? So long story short, we're going to have in August of 2015, specifically from August 7th to the 15th, a Centurion's Rehabilitation Program. Anybody out there who has worked in the abortion industry, and we know a lot of these folks that have come out, we're inviting them to come and take this intensive rehabilitation to heal, to get some serious healing. It's not just a matter of saying, Lord, please forgive me. Oh, okay, now everything's all right. No. This is serious stuff that, Dr. Ney himself is going to lead this week of psychological and spiritual rehabilitation. And societyofcenturions.com is the website where people can sign up for that.
That is great. That is awesome. It's understanding God's grace and mercy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and it takes a while. This is not, it's like you say, you don't just come out and say, oh, I'm sorry, everything's okay, let's go ahead. It'd be like saying, we're going to take a guard from Auschwitz and we're going to bring him in and say, hey, you've been doing wrong. And he's going to, oh, I'm sorry, and everything's going to be
Yeah, you put your hand on him, give him a blessing, and then
Yeah.
expect him to live his life in a normal
But the
way.
point here is that we need to make is that what you're talking about is professional help.
Yes.
We're not talking about laymen. We're not talking about people who really don't know what they're doing, whose hearts may be in the right place.
That's right.
Sometimes they're not, but their hearts may be in the right place. We've got a lot of people out there who clearly do not know what they're doing when they're trying to help these people. And it would be like if someone had, if you cut your finger, then you may be able to run in and get a Band-Aid and put on it, and that's all that needs to be done. But if somebody has total renal failure and their kidneys have shut down, you have to have a professional that knows how to deal with that. And very often what we see is the same person that puts the Band-Aid on somebody's finger is the one who's doing the psychological help with these people that come out of the abortion industry, and they do them more harm than good.
That's right.
And so you got to have professionals like that. But
That's right.
Anyway, real quickly, we had two different people. We got one of them here wanted us to bring up on Life Talk our force form, and we have a form that crisis pregnancy centers and even some sidewalk counselors we've talked to have used in front of the clinics. We know that a very high percentage of the women in this country who have abortions, and the report that you and I wrote, we proved that, a very high percentage of the women who have abortions in this country are being forced to have them. And I don't mean just talked into it. I mean physically forced at the threat of being beaten or killed or with a knife at their throat or whatever to have an abortion. And we have a form that we have used for years, and you can download it if you're a CPC counselor or a sidewalk counselor, anyone can go and look at it at forceform.info. And we need to really be pushing that because this works. This form works. I won't go into all the details we've talked about.
I would say take it one step further. If you're with NOW or NARAL, please also download this form because you're also against forced abortions, supposedly.
Yeah.
So.
Come on, Destiny.
That's not a choice.
Destin, let me ask you a question.
Let's just cast a wider net. That's all I'm saying.
She's optimistic.
What color is the sky in your world, Destiny?
I'm holding them to what they say, which is they are pro-choice.
Want choice.
That's not
They want
pro-choice.
choice.
They don't care if women are forced to have abortions.
No, that's right.
They don't care if they're killed. They don't care if their throats are cut. They don't care if they're put in a nursing home. All that matters to them is that the baby
promote
gets
abortion.
killed.
Yep.
They don't care if they're sent back to the rapist.
Right, exactly. That's another issue. And we're working on another report right now that you're pretty deeply involved in, that's going to be pretty eye-opening as well on this very subject about what happens to women.
And this is great, really, that if our pro-life community just realizes this, if we can stop all the abortions that are forced, simply because they're forced, not even saying because the baby has a right to life, not even saying because the baby's a person, all that's true, but just to stop the force, we would drastically reduce the number of abortions.
Well, I've been on radio programs before when the pro-aborts would call in. They don't do it much anymore, and I'd always ask them and say, look, you're pro-choice. Are you pro a woman's choice not to have an abortion? What are you doing about that? You'll move heaven and earth to support a woman's right to have an abortion. What will you do for the woman who says, I don't want to have an abortion? What will you do for her? Mm-hmm. And they'll hopscotch all around it, but in the final analysis, the answer is nothing. They won't do anything.
No, they refer them to one of our pregnancy counseling centers. That is actually their plan.
Right, exactly.
They're not going to get an abortion. They go talk to a CPC.
Speaking of the issue of rape, there's a British doctor, and it just doesn't go on in the United States, it goes on everywhere. But there is a British doctor, Michael Solomon, that has raped several young girls and got one pregnant. And forced an abortion on her, and he's gone to court and he's having to testify. And
Well, and that's like the deal in Arizona.
Brian Finkel.
Well, no, Finkel. They've got a new situation in Arizona where a kid was raping. He wasn't a kid, but I mean, he was an adult. He was raping all these little girls.
yes,
And taking them in for abortions, and nobody was reporting it. And he raped 18 more girls.
yes,
You know.
yes,
Renee, was this guy in Britain? And he's an abortionist in Britain?
yes.
So he's no better than the baby killers we've got here.
Well,
right.
the point she's making is, though, that this is not just an American issue. This is a problem that's endemic to the abortion.
To the abortion industry.
I would say it's human depravity. Father, you say this all the time. You can't practice vice virtuously.
Right.
If you've got a young lady under anesthesia and you're a depraved pig that kills babies every day, what's to stop you from raping her as well?
Well, that's the report that you're working on, and we'll be having a lot of new information because I revealed that originally in line 5 that I wrote in 96. I had a chapter in there, and I don't think anybody really thought about it. I had never thought about it, about the number of women that get raped and sexually assaulted in abortion clinics.
That's right.
And
Well, I read that book, and that's how we got Acapulano out of L.A. And of course, he fled the country, but he still has an indictment. This is what, 20 years ago?
20 years ago. Right.
You know, he's got an indictment for rape, and he fled the country.
Well, when I wrote that book, and when you write a book, the first thing you do is make the table of contents, and then you fill it in. I didn't even have a chapter in there for rape of women, but when we started investigating it, and I know that Mona Passignano was the one who first kind of stumbled onto this. We started getting case after case after case, and then all of a sudden it started making sense because what you have here, and we don't want to get too far down the road because we're working on this, or you're working on it right now. We're updating this, and you found a bunch more cases. Lots more cases. But basically what you have is you have young females, and obviously they're young because they're pregnant, right? So they're not going to be like 80 years old or something. So you have young females who are in a situation where the vast majority of them can't tell anyone where they are. The reason they're having the abortion is to hide their pregnancy or hide their sexual activity from someone. And they're overseen by a guy that we would all agree has very, very sketchy morals, or he wouldn't be doing abortions to begin with. And he knows she can't tell anybody where she is. And she's a sitting target. You know, in line 5, I called that the canned hunt.
Yeah.
You know, where these guys think they're big game hunters because they hire somebody to go out and capture an elephant and stomp him to the ground. Then they go out and shoot him and mount his head on the wall, and they think they're big game hunters or something. It's called a canned hunt. That's the situation these women are in, and that's what you're finding in the stuff you're doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, make sure and contact my office, Renee, maybe next week, because we have 2 cases just from last week.
Okay.
2 new ones.
2 brand new ones.
Yep.
Horrible.
I want to go over a couple of things here before we move on, and I know you've got some more stuff you want to get to. I had somebody call me the other day that had gone on to order something online from us and didn't like the fact, in fact, would not order from us because we use PayPal. And they said, you're aware that PayPal donates money to Planned Parenthood. How can you be, as a pro-life group, be giving money to Planned Parenthood? And you know, this is an issue that we've dealt with for many, many years, and we know that Life Decisions International keeps a list of these organizations that donate. And one of the things I tried to explain to this person that called, as I've said before, is if you're going to adhere to these boycotts, well, first off, I want to get in a minute. I have my theories about why they haven't worked in the past in the pro-life movement. But if you're going to adhere to these, my joke I always tell is that you're going to be standing naked as a jaybird out in a field somewhere growing your own food, because everybody in this country is tied to the abortion business somehow or another. And for example, I remember many, many years ago, the big target was American Express, because American Express was found to be giving the money to Planned Parenthood. And I had an American Express card at the time, and I was doing a speech somewhere, some pro-life group. Somebody saw me use it, and you know, they were aghast that we had this. And I said, well, what credit cards do you use? They said, well, I have a MasterCard and a Visa card. Okay, go into your Yellow Pages and show me an ad for an abortion clinic that doesn't take MasterCard and Visa. Why are you using MasterCard and Visa? Every abortion clinic in this country. Some of them don't take American Express, but every one of them takes MasterCard, right? And unfortunately, this woman that happened to have taken me to to the dinner that night took me in a Ford Windstar van, a little minivan. And I said, I noticed that we drove here in a Ford. Do you know one of the biggest contributors to the abortion industry is the Ford Foundation? And they not only give money to Planned Parenthood, Ford Foundation gives money directly to individual abortion clinics. I don't know if they still do today, but at that time they did. So Ford gives money directly to individual abortion clinics. So are you going to get rid of your Ford Windstar van? And the fact is, you can go down the line on this, and you're not going to eat it at Red Lobster because they're owned by, Brinker Foundation, who gives money to Planned Parenthood. And you're not going to shop at Montgomery Ward's because Montgomery Ward's at that time was still in business. They're owned by Mobil Oil Company, who gives money.
And you're not going to wear Nike shoes.
You're not going to wear Nike shoes. You're basically, like I said, you're going to be standing naked in a field somewhere growing your own food if you're going to adhere to all this. So the question is, what's the answer to this? And why have these boycotts that the pro-life movement has done in the past, why have they not been successful? And my view is because we haven't done boycotts the way, for example, unions, trade unions, do union negotiations. As y'all know, I came from the auto industry, and I can tell you that in the auto industry, when the UAW contract used to be up, it might be up with Ford, GM, and Chrysler all at the same time. But the union would sit down and start negotiating with one of them, and they might strike that company. Let's say it was General Motors. They might strike that company, even though they had the same agreement with everybody else, but they let everybody else keep on working. And they say, we're going to target GM this time. Right. GM's going to be our target. And as soon as GM signed a contract, then everybody else fell in line, and they did whatever the contract was that GM got. That's what Chrysler and Ford would do. That's the way you make a boycott work.
Yeah.
I think that the way the pro-life movement needs to be doing this is don't be looking at this catalog of people that you're not going to buy from, because you physically cannot do it. You cannot do it. You cannot buy gasoline from a company, whether it's Shell or Mobil or Exxon or whoever it might be, that doesn't give money to Planned Parenthood. You can't do it. It's not physically possible.
Mark, I've only called for one nationwide boycott in my entire 20-plus year of doing pro-life work, and that was against La Quinta. The La Quinta, you remember this,
right.
La Quinta Hotel. After Kristen Gilbert died, she was housed at the La Quinta.
They were giving them discounts.
Yeah, they were giving them discounts, and this is where Tiller kind of operated this as a secondary extension of his abortion clinic. And after she died, we called for a nationwide boycott of La Quinta, and the calls flooded into the national headquarters, the emails flooded in, and within 2 days, I got a call from Wayne Goldberg, Executive Vice President of La Quinta, says, what can we do to get this to stop? And he sent an investigator down to Wichita, found out that it was true, that all the women were being housed, they were getting discounts right there at La Quinta. He pulled the plug, he got kicked out. We spoke about this in our new book, and we win.
Right.
It has to be local, both local and specific, and targeted to one organization.
And you stay on them. And I
stay on them, yeah.
Right. I think that the pro-life movement would benefit greatly from, let's say, once a year, all the leaders come together and say, the only subject of this conversation is who we're going to boycott. And you look at all the things and you vote and you decide, okay, our target for this year is whoever, Walmart, whoever it might be.
It could be PayPal.
It could be PayPal.
Sure.
That's fine. It could be anybody. It could be Ford. It could be whoever. And again, I don't want to be picking on Ford. We have a Ford van right here. Our company van here is a Ford. But we're going to have to start getting serious. If we're going to do this at all. If we're not, then let's just quit talking about it. But if we're going to be serious about it, then let's start picking out our target and say, this is who we're going to go after. I'm not worried about who else you're supporting. Just go out there, eat wherever you want to eat, buy whatever you want to buy, fill up your car wherever you want to fill up, do whatever you want to do. But we're targeting these people. And if you start making examples like this, I guarantee you this, La Quinta thinks, there's millions of pro-lifers in this country. We don't want to have them passing our hotels to go to Holiday Inn.
And we coupled it to a late-term abortionist who was being vilified across the nation and a death of a poor young lady from Texas.
Right. But even if you don't have those
associated.
facts, but if you're just simply saying, look, your corporation
right.
gives money to Planned Parenthood, y'all gave $500,000 or whatever it is in the last 10 years to Planned Parenthood, our people are not going to come there anymore as long as that's going on.
Well, I'm talking about coupling it to a hot issue. Planned Parenthood does sex selection abortions. Planned Parenthood killed Tanya Reeves. Right. And because they killed Tanya Reeves, we're not going to support your organization that gives to Planned Parenthood.
Whatever.
Make it a hot button issue. Make it Make it personal.
Right.
I think what also made yours effective was the fact that people were calling and emailing, because what I find so ironic about this long list, you're right. It's not like when we don't purchase this item, we call the company and let them know we bought from your competitor. You got the phone call about PayPal. PayPal didn't get the phone call saying we're not going to support you. So like let's be smart with our activism and make sure we're actually targeting the company and not just pro-lifers who happen to be using it.
Right. Well, like I said, I think what we ought to do is we ought to pick out one. And I don't care if it takes them a week to cave in or it takes them 10 years. That's our target. And we say we're going to stick with them until they do the right thing. And the second that they do, we're going to pick out another target. Right. And I'm going to tell you, I think even the people, I think you may have somebody that digs in their heels. Let's say it's American Express. They dig in their heels and say, okay, pro-lifers can turn in all their American Express cards if they want to, but we're going to give money to Planned Parenthood. All right, fine. Then y'all dig in your heels. We'll target you, and you'll lose all the pro-life business in the country. I think there'll be, even if they dig in their heels and stick to it, there may be other companies that look at that and say, American Express is going to stick with it, but I don't want them turning their attention on us. Next time our charitable giving comes up at our board meeting, well, let's just take Planned Parenthood off the table so we'll just avoid this altogether.
So are we going to pick a company and announce it on next month's episode?
What I'm saying is the pro-life leadership needs to come together and agree
On which
that this
one
is who we're going to target. This is the company we're going to target. If we don't all do it, it doesn't matter. If Priests for Life targets somebody and you target somebody and we target somebody and we dilute our impact, then none of us has any impact. But if we were all to get together and National Right to Life and Judy Brown at American Life League and every other pro-life, pro-family Christian organization in this country says, we're going to pick out a target and those people aren't going to get our business, I guarantee you they will not stick with it because they do not want to lose that business. They do not want to lose that business. But until we do that, this idea of you're going to put out a catalog, and if you put out all of them, I mean, you'd have a catalog that thick, it would look like a phone book. And so every time you bought something or went somewhere, you're going to have to go through there and say, okay.
I've done that.
Huh?
I've done it.
Okay, but wait a minute. Let me give you a good example of this. You fly in here every month from Southwest Airlines.
Right.
Nobody is a bigger supporter than Southwest Airlines.
Well, I'm saying I'll put it this way. I tried to do it. As you look through this list, you think that you can't go out to eat, you can't buy gas, you can't use Google, Microsoft.
Right.
You can't buy this car.
It's the toner in your computer. I mean, it's like everything.
Yeah. Right.
And what a lot of these companies do actually is they'll match their employees. So an employee can pick a charity, and so if the employee says, I'm going to give $20 to Planned Parenthood, then the company will match that. So it really kind of opens it up to so many companies, feeding into the abortion industry.
Well, we get donations here once in a while. We got one just the other day. We opened the mail, somebody giving us, $50?
From Mobile, I think.
From Mobile Oil or somebody, and once they're an executive level person at Mobile, any donation they make to a charity, Mobile donates the same amount. So we had to fill out this form, and we'll eventually get $50 from Mobile Oil Company. Right. Now, if you looked at their charitable giving at the end of the year on their 990 tax reforms, it shows Mobile Oil gave $50 to Life Dynamics. Well, Mobile Oil didn't really do that. They had no choice because one of their employees did it, and they have this policy. So you're going to have to be wise about this. The Bible says, "Be wise as serpents and gentle as doves." And we got the gentle as doves part down to an art in the pro-life movement.
That's for sure.
But the wise as serpents part, we sometimes kind of skip over that one.
Well, Destiny, I think that we should just go with Obamacare next month. What do you think about that?
Yeah,
we're going to make an executive decision right here on Life Talk. We're boycotting Obamacare.
Are you really? Okay. Yep. Anyway,
Well, it's good that you bring this up, Marcus. A lot of the activists are confused about all this, and there's a moral principle behind it, which is it's the morality of cooperation. Right. There's different kinds of cooperation. And in the Catholic tradition, we talk about formal versus material. Formal cooperation means, I agree with you. I agree on you're going to do abortions. I agree with that. That's why I'm going to use your business. Obviously, that's completely prohibited. You can never do that. Then material cooperation is, well, I'm giving you something that then you're going to use for something that I disagree with. Well, if that's all that they're doing, then you can't even give material cooperation. In other words, an abortion clinic, I can't so much as clip the hedges out in front of the place because everything they're doing is all their resources directed towards killing babies. So I can't have anything to do with that. But a company that's really serving people, Southwest Airlines, really getting people, it gets you here to do this good pro-life work, What's the percentage? of how much money they're giving and what percentage of that money did you give by your airline ticket. When it becomes so remote, when it becomes so minuscule, so fractional, the moral obligation there disappears. You're not required to abstain from or boycott that particular.
Well,
you know what I mean?
yeah,
so
right.
this is the morality. There's a distinction here.
But the fact is, Father Frank, you know this is true. If you took one of these people, and I'm sure you've heard them too, like this man that called in the other day complaining to us about PayPal. If you took these people who are taking this hardline position that you can't do this, and I told this guy the other day, I said, look, if I follow you around, now I asked him what kind of car he had, and he said he had a Toyota. Because if he said he had a Ford, I would have brought that up. But I bet you if we look at Toyota, I bet you Toyota gives money to Planned Parenthood. I don't know that, but I would guess so. But if you take one of these people who takes this rock-ribbed approach, and you follow them around for a month, I guarantee you, promise you 100%, they're giving more money to other organizations that support Planned Parenthood than PayPal does. Mm-hmm. So, you know, they're basically, basically now, abortion has such tentacles so far into our culture that you cannot avoid it. And we're never going to solve all these problems until we chop off the head of this beast, which is stop abortion.
That's right.
You know, and I made that point back when we were the organization that went undercover and found out about the trafficking in body parts. And I had all these people say, well, you know, this is going to end this atrocity. And I said, wait a minute, don't
Not so fast, yeah.
Let's don't go down that trail. And sure enough, it didn't. I said, yes, they're chopping up these babies. They sell the parts for extra profit. And you can take a baby that you kill for $300, expense from the mother, and make $2,000 off that dead body. Yes, that's true. But the fact is, you're never going to stop all these atrocities until you stop legalized abortion, because it all flows from that. It all starts at the top and goes out from there. Right. And what you're basically doing is curing symptoms. You're not curing the disease. Mm-hmm. But in this case, I'd be all for the pro-life movement, like I said before. Pick out a target. Say, this is who we're all going to agree. If we don't all agree and don't all get together and say, okay, at least on this one issue, we can all agree. This is going to be our target, and we're going to stay after them until they do the right thing, and then we'll get together and pick out another target as soon as they do. I think the whole boycott thing is a waste.
And I think that's just smart. I think we have to realize people who do the boycotts, their heart's in the right place.
Right.
They want to do the right thing. It's like we saw with the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge or whatever, that everybody was doing this and it was this fun kind of fundraiser and you were raising money for a good cause. And then we found out that it was contributing to embryonic stem cell research. I think one of the best things about that was you had was it the John Paul? You had an alternative foundation that you could give money to that also helped with ALS, but it wasn't going to be contributing to that. So perhaps in the next month we can do some research and find out one of these companies that is actively supporting Planned Parenthood, not just, like you said, this fractional amount, but actively doing it. And then, I think that by next month we should have an organization that we promote us doing some sort of boycott to, and it would be great if there was also a pro-life organization that people could put their money towards, that would be comparable in whatever services it is we're boycotting.
Yeah, but we're never going to get anywhere until we target.
Absolutely.
It's the real question is, do you want to take the shotgun approach or do you want to take the rifle approach? Well, the shotgun approach won't get you anywhere.
That is such a Texas-y thing to say.
Yeah, well, we're in Texas.
I know. It's very fitting.
What's the problem with that?
I'm not sure about the analogy.
know.
Born and raised.
That's right. I don't see anything wrong with that.
It's not very pro-life. Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on here. We're not going to apologize for being Texans, are we?
No.
Heck no.
Not at all.
Apologize for that.
I like the Texas sayings I pick up when I'm down here.
Yeah, that's good. We're trying to straighten
on
you
to
out.
'em.
The boy's from California.
I know.
From California.
Bless his
Sorry.
heart.
Loose, dude.
Yeah, that's right. Bless his heart. It ain't easy being Troy, let me tell you.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Especially coming
And
to Texas.
Yeah, that's right. Have y'all noticed something, how, the law here in Texas is being held up by the courts again, and it's headed to the Supreme Court. And have you noticed something that's really spooky about all these judicial rulings? They're not being ruled on constitutional basis. They're being ruled on outcomes.
Yeah.
So we talked about this the other day. If you go back and look at the history of the three branches of government that our forefathers set up, they set the judiciary up to be the weakest of the three, right, because they admitted that it had the most potential for harm to the country. Now it's the strongest of the three.
Yeah.
So you literally can have a situation now where a law could be passed in Texas with overwhelming support. Let's just say for a moment it never happened, but let's say it had unanimous support.
Yeah.
From the
And
people.
it was constitutional.
And it was constitutional. And let's just say that the state legislature passed it unanimously and the governor signed it.
Right.
And there's not one person in the state of Texas who opposes this law. A federal judge somewhere who's never set foot in the state of Texas can invalidate that law the way that.
Well, this is happening with the marriage laws across the country. I mean, state constitutions being amended legally through the will of the people, and they're just being overturned by one judge.
Right.
And the interesting thing about HB 2 is that they're not saying that
HB 2 is the bill here in Texas.
Right, that's the one you alluded to. They're not saying, well, you know what, abortionists really shouldn't have hospital privileges, or these places really shouldn't be ambulatory surgical centers. What they're saying is, because this law will, in essence, close this abortion clinic, and they're too cheap and lazy and scoundrel moes to actually upgrade their facility, that because there's not an abortion clinic within 150 or 200 miles, we're just going to keep it open.
So it's outcome-based.
It's outcome-based.
That's right.
Yeah, we don't. It doesn't matter if these women's lives are in jeopardy. It's okay, just as long as there's an abortion clinic, because abortion somehow supersedes everything.
But the courts are supposed to be ruling on whether it's constitutional or not. And they're not even doing that. They're not even looking at the constitutionality. They're just looking at the outcome.
Right.
Say, what is the outcome of this law? Well, if the outcome of this law is that these bad abortionists who can't get hospital privileges because they're such quacks, that causes the abortion clinic to shut down. Now this woman has to drive 150 miles to Dallas to get an abortion. That puts an undue burden on these women, so we're going to invalidate the law.
An undue burden was created by Sandra Day O'Connor out of whole cloth.
It was made
thin
up out
air,
of thin air, right?
And now it's some sort of judicial principle.
And what's happening is just exactly what Justice Scalia said in his dissent in that case when O'Connor came up with that. He said that we set this rule of undue burden, and any time a law is passed, the court's going to have to come in and be a referee. Is this an undue? You're getting us into the business of refereeing every single law that regulates abortion, and we shouldn't be doing that. And what he said was exactly what's coming to pass.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. You know, and you'd mentioned the homosexual marriage thing. They're now looking at, you had this big case here in Texas, for example, where the state refused to hear a divorce case between two homosexuals that had gotten married in Massachusetts or somewhere. So they come to Texas, and now they're going to get a divorce in Dallas, and the state refused to allow that to go to get a divorce because they're saying if you give them a divorce, you're recognizing the validity of the marriage, and we don't. And so now you have the federal court saying that Texas has to recognize, or they're trying to get them to say, you have to recognize the legal marriages in other states. If those people come to Texas, you have to recognize their marriage.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's the case, because they're saying they don't want to. It's unfair to have these people have to live under one standard in one state and another standard in another state. All right, what about gun laws? So you have a state, let's say Washington D.C., for example, who has not a state, but it has the strictest gun laws in the country, and a guy shows up there with a handgun in his pocket, and he says, "Hey, I have a concealed carry permit in Texas." You have to recognize that.
Yeah.
It actually happens all the time.
Right, but you got this poor woman this black lady up in New Jersey, who they're threatening to put her in prison because she had a gun in her purse and went into Pennsylvania where they don't recognize the concealed carry. Now they're threatening to put her in prison, or vice versa. New Jersey and Pennsylvania, I think. Anyway, so why don't we apply that standard there? If that's going to be the standard that we're going to say, and once you cross that line, then there are no more state laws. There's only federal laws.
Well, you know, Mark, I think it's important to bring one thing up. Of course, this is the October Life Talk, and you know whether we're talking about these laws on the state level that can end up closing these abortion mills and getting these abortionists in jail, whether we're talking about judges who are either elected by people or appointed or confirmed by people who are elected. We're talking about people are voting into office, and of course, we're coming up on the midterm elections, November 4th. You know, we all know the messiness and the limitations of politics and sometimes the false hope that we put in the political system. But the fact remains, we can make progress in this election, especially looking at the local scene. Mm-hmm. We know all the work we do at state health departments, medical boards, you know, looking at the local people running, you know, who's willing to do something to advance the protection of the unborn. You know, it's not, and we've talked about this before when we talk about politics, don't just tell me what you believe. Don't just tell me your philosophy,
care
your
what you
pro-life. What are you going to do for the protection of the unborn, closing of abortion mills, restoring the rights of these women, the health of these women? What are you going to do? So I just want to encourage people to go to our election website, politicalresponsibility.com. First of all, we have a prayer campaign underway here, electionprayer.com. We've got the things people can do, little ways, but a lot of people doing little things to try to make some progress as we come to election.
Well, the point is, and it's something that, Troy and I don't agree on everything because he's wrong on a whole bunch of stuff. Anyway,
Well, you're wrong on that one.
No, but one thing we've always said, and you've said the same thing, we've got our focus on Washington, D.C. This thing is not going to end in Washington, D.C. It's not going to end even in the state capitals. It's going to end community by community, or it's not going to be ended at all. It's going to be ended on the local level.
Right.
And that's what we have to get people to understand.
And that's where it is ending, Mark. I mean,
That's where it is
Look
ending.
at the numbers. 73% of all the nation's abortion clinics have closed.
Right.
Pregnancy counseling centers outnumber abortion clinics 5 to 1.
Right.
The trends are all going in our direction. Now, we talked a lot of bad news today, but ultimately we're in the midst of victory and a mop.
Well, I was going to finish the show up. We're completely out of time.
So I was right again?
Yep. Yeah, like I say, it's a rare,
I love it when he says that.
rare situation.
I'd like to say something too, really quick,
Okay, go
though,
ahead.
because conservatives are having more babies than liberals, and so we need to vote our morals and our values here, and not. I mean, they're having abortions while we're having babies.
Right.
Amen.
That's right. And that's the point I used to make in my old seminars. We'd eventually overwhelm them because they're having abortions while we're having babies, and abortions don't grow up to vote.
That's right.
And we're starting to see that now, and that's what you're talking about. There's a new study out showing pro-lifers are having 27% more babies than pro-choice people are.
Mm-hmm.
27%? 27%. But not only that, what's just as important is that study. I can't remember what that study was from. Do you remember what university took that study?
I'm not sure.
One of the things that they identified was that not only Northwestern University. Not only did they identify 27% higher birth rate among pro-life families than pro-choice families, but even among the pro-choice families that have babies, a high percentage of their children are rejecting their parents' views on abortion.
Yes.
So, we're going to overwhelm them with numbers, and I think you're starting to see this now because this younger generation is starting to get to the age where they're starting to vote, and that's being reflected in all the polls that are showing, this pro-life victory. But, I talked earlier about this thing about what these judges are doing. And we talked about HB2 here in Texas. When HB2 was enacted, a study was done after the first 6 months of it being enacted. The abortion rate in Texas dropped 4,600 abortions. That's over 9,000 babies a year that would be saved by HB2. That's why they've got to fight it in the courts. Because they can't win it politically. Obviously, they can't win in Texas politically. So they've got to fight it in the courts. And if they have to go outside the state and a judge somewhere else may not have ever even been to Texas says, no, you can't do that, that's the only hope they've got. But that's the bottom line right there. 9,600 abortions less a year because of one piece of state legislation. That's why they have to fight it. The fact is, and again, we're totally out of time, we are winning this battle. Don't make any mistake about it. And we've got all kinds of examples of that, evidence of that. We talk about it all the time. But I'll tell you one I think is one of the best examples is you're seeing this move now among the pro-aborts to do away with the term pro-choice.
That's right.
Have you noticed that?
That's right.
Because they're saying they've got research that shows choice is now just a proxy for abortion. The American people aren't fooled anymore.
That's right.
That choice is just a proxy word for abortion, and so we've got to separate ourselves again. So now we're calling it women's health. And I think they're making a mistake there because we've got the arguments to beat the devil out of them on that deal. That's right. I challenge anyone to tell me a woman climbs on an abortionist table, kills her baby, and climbs off. Show me one woman that was ever healthier because of that. If this is health care, then that means that woman has to get off that table. At least some of them have to get off that table healthier than they were when they climbed up on it. And that's not true. Nobody can tell me, and no doctor can come in here and say, oh yeah, she's healthier because of X.
And that's one of the key principles of medicine. Before you do a medical intervention, there has to be a medical benefit.
Right.
That you know about.
Right. That you can predict and that you can replicate time and time again. Anyway, we are winning. Don't make any mistake about that.
I'd like to end on a happy note here.
Okay.
Mary's Choice in Sioux City, Iowa, has a pro-life pregnancy resource center, and she's right next to Planned Parenthood, and so there was a concrete wall that was separating them too, and people that would go to Planned Parenthood would give her a call because they would see a sign that's on the side of her wall and hop over to go to the pregnancy center. Well, Planned Parenthood decided to put up a tall wooden fence, and to hide the sign. And so there was a businessman that drove by because the pregnancy center didn't have the money to put a billboard, a tall sign. And anyways, a businessman drove by and was convicted and decided to purchase a sign that's on a telescopic pole. So if Planned Parenthood goes in and puts up a higher wall, they can just lift the sign up and people at Planned Parenthood will see what's going on at Mary's Choice. It's really cool.
Right.
It's really neat. And she has software to change the signs to just speak to these women individually that go into the Planned
it's an
Parenthood.
electronic billboard.
It's an electronic billboard.
Nice.
Pretty
It's
cool.
on a telescopic pole, so make the
I
sign
love it.
higher, make your fence higher if you want
That's
to.
right. Go right ahead.
I love choices. I love women being offered choices. That makes me very pro-choice.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thanks, guys. Great show.
Yep.
And
Thank you.
is everybody be back again next month?
I will.
I'll be back.
We'll see.
3 months in a row, I've been able to round up all the cats.
Don't put your money on it.
Herding cats. Well, we're not really concerned with you. But anyway, good show. Thanks, guys. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this month. Thanks for being with us. And remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how this killing is going to stop. We'll see you in November.